So now we are going to talk about key issues that we need to think about when we are embarking in a participatory project. So based on the issues that we have presented now and the things we looked at in relation to the barriers to participation, I want you to think, what do you think should be some of the principles, the guiding principles that we need to have in mind when we are doing participation? You know, particularly when we are working with vulnerable, marginalized, and oppressed communities, how can we do participation in a way that avoids imposing predefined solutions and avoids doing it in a top-down way that doesn't enable them to prioritize the issues that they want to resolve? How can we make participatory spaces inclusive? What do we need to think about to make them inclusive and to make them in a way that communities trust these spaces? Because examples I've given you before are not spaces that everyone would trust or would want to engage with. So what do you think? Like, just very quickly, do you have any ideas of things we need to think about?
No hierarchy.
No.
Try to be equal.
Very important. No hierarchy. Very good. And how can we try not to have a hierarchy? That's very important.
Yeah. Respect.
Respect. Yeah.
Some communities might actually engage in behavior that is like illegal in a country.
Yeah.
So a physically safe space.
Yes,
where
very
you can
important.
meet, maybe even involving like security. That, yeah.
Very important. Yes. Thank you.
Including key informants who have influence on that community.
So key leaders from the community.
Yeah, who have influence.
Who have, yes, yes. Very important.
Through like recruitment and holding, for example, like a space, you might not want to disclose. So for example, if I'm inviting HIV positive young people to a space, you need to do that in like a sensitive way so that you aren't disclosing this like
safe
status.
Yeah.
Or have, you know, holding it in a public place and advertising why those people might be there.
Yeah. So safe spaces. Yeah.
I think an understanding of colloquialisms is also handy to have.
Yeah. Very important. Thank you. Great ideas. Great. Thank you. Okay. So remember the learnings so far. We have discussed that participation is a social process of interaction between people. It's dynamic as well. It involves encounters between people who bring different knowledges and different identities to the participatory process. So it's very important to be attentive when we are doing participation to the nature of the relationships that we facilitate through these processes. It's important to be sensitive to the types of knowledge people bring to the encounter, and it's important to think about the nature of the spaces where we do participation. So if you work with sex workers and that's illegal, where do we gather them? How can we make a safe space for participants? And it's important also to think about the techniques that we use to involve communities. So yesterday we had a fantastic overview of different very creative and engaging techniques, and I've given you now more very top-down formal techniques that might not be so engaging for participants, right? So we need to think about the tools that we use to involve. In a way, we need to think about this because we need to ensure that participatory initiatives support the collaboration between people and the development of new types of knowledge and identities that enable social change as well. Because we know that if participation is not done well, can be tokenistic, can disengage communities, can reinforce pre-existing inequalities and power hierarchies. So sometimes participation is done in a way that only certain members of the community would want to participate, and others are excluded, not intentionally, but by the way participation is done, you are excluding some people because it's done in terms that don't work for everyone. But we also know through our work and through the literature that there is not one size fits all solution for participation. We need to be flexible, and we need to respond to the needs of the communities we are involving. So participation can be done in different ways to meet the needs of our communities. So what I want you to do now is, the task is to divide, maybe work in the same groups. You were split for the game. And I want you to kind of brainstorm principles to guide your participatory practice, to ensure that the participation that you do is ethical and is effective. Not only that you gather what you want to gather, the type of knowledge that, but also that ensure is ethical and is done in a way that responds to the needs of your communities. You want to harness and mobilize the knowledge of the participants, but you want to ensure that it's done in the right way and doesn't have a negative impact on participants. Okay. Yes, so we've talked about this. There are lots of potentialities in participation. Participation can be very useful, but there are risks as well, because it's very important to ensure marginalized and underserved populations have a voice and influence research. And we know that communities can act as powerful change agents. So if they are participating in a research project and in a program, intervention, development, then they can go to the communities and tell them about it and change behavior and influence as well as contributing with very important knowledge. But if we don't do it well, it can disengage communities and it can create more mistrust as well. So we need to think about ethical principles. You've discussed most of them. The conversations were very interesting. So one of the things is consent, but not always necessarily in the form of consent as we do in research, of signing a form. Like in the UK, we don't have to sign a consent form for participants to be doing participatory work. Not research participants, but to be members of our team. But it's important to have ongoing consent about whether they are happy to participate in the way they are doing. Not as a one-off thing that you talked at the beginning of the project, but as something that you renegotiate as the project is going. Like, are you happy the way we are doing this? Do you like the way we are working? Things like that are very important to maintain the relationship, to sustain people as well, to make sure they are happy with the way that we are working together. Also, it's very important to inform them about how the inputs they bring into the project is being used. Participants want to know how their contributions are being used. They don't want it to be a tokenistic exercise. They want to ensure they're having an impact. And it's important that we show them how we are using their contributions in the project. Very important, inclusivity and diversity. So I've talked about this, that we should create different participatory opportunities for people who want to participate in different ways. We need to ensure as well that we involve different people, not always the same expert patients that we know are articulate and are going to be able to manage, the research process, etc. We need to try to involve everyone, and there needs to be heterogeneity. So we should think about not always involving the same member of the community. Try to involve others as well. So that's why it's important that we do participation in different ways, so that it's engaging. Engages different people. So for example, think about someone with disability and visual impairments. How can we involve them? What types of participatory activities do we have with them? Maybe we need to use virtual spaces or platforms that are more accessible to them. Maybe we need to involve the gatekeepers or peers to help them participate so that they can be involved. And then power sharing. You've also mentioned power sharing. How can we ensure that there are no hierarchies? How can we ensure that involvement is meaningful? So how can we ensure that the input is taken seriously and it's not just a tokenistic exercise? So for this, it's important to think about the spaces where people participate. So for sex workers, for example, if sex work is criminalized, we need to think about safe spaces for participation. Maybe they want to work in the community where they meet their peers, and maybe that's the space where they feel more confident to participate. If abortion is criminalized and we want to talk about abortion with women, how do we create a safe space for them to feel like they can participate. Maybe it's an online space that is anonymous. Maybe it's not a meeting in the community, right? So we need to think about that, because participation can have unintended harmful effects on our participants, okay? And then transparency as well is very important. We need to be transparent. We've talked about it. We need to tell them why they are being involved. We need to manage expectations as well about what we can do with their participation and their input, how much we can influence change in the community or in services. So we need to talk about the purpose of participation. We need to talk about what we can achieve in terms of change. We need to talk about how their input is being used in the program. And this needs to be very clear always, okay? And we need to value those involved. We need to recognize that they come with very important knowledge to the participatory space. And we should compensate for their time, because we are being paid to do participation. And we need to compensate for the time and what the expertise that they bring. So it's important to, if you are putting a grant proposal, it's important to, in the budget, to have money and resources for participation as well. So also, some of them, we've talked about those that want to pursue an academic career or a career. So maybe we should provide them with reference letters or certificates of the training we are giving them. So something they can take as well after the participation. And we should have kind of dialogue with them about how the participation is going. We need to ensure that, you know, we reflect upon the actual participatory relationship and ensure they are happy with it as well. So we could ask things like, how is participation progressing? Do you think we are being ethical, compliant with the principles we said we would have in the team? Do you think we should incorporate other guiding principles for terms of reference for our participation? Do you have any concerns? So things like that are important to have a dialogue with. And all of these are important for ensuring communities, participants trust us and want to stay involved, right?